Hi, I'm Zehra Sasal, a PhD student at Wilfrid Laurier University, and today I would like to talk to you about some of the research we conduct in our lab. Let's start with something that we all have experience in, such as learning a new skill, whether that be learning a new language, learning how to drive, or even downloading a new app on your phone. So some people will need clear step-by-step instructions, and others will like to listen, or others will like to watch. And some people will learn best by simply just trying it. And we're usually pretty okay with that, right? That makes sense. We're all different. We all have different ways of learning. However, when that learning looks different, especially in areas that involve communication, speech, or in areas that we come directly in contact with, unfortunately, we don't always know how to extend that same flexibility and kindness. And today, we're going to be talking about speech. We're going to be talking about sensory differences, the way people perceive the world differently, and autism. And if there is one idea that I hope stays with you today, it's this. If someone perceives the world differently, they will process it differently. And that difference is not a problem to be fixed. Over the years, I've had many families tell me that their child at home is very verbal, highly coherent in their speech, can explain complex ideas. However, that same child in the school environment, in a busy classroom, completely shuts down. They become reserved and quiet. And when you think about it, it's not the child who has changed, it's the environment. And before we even talk about speech, let's pause and talk about autism itself. Because how we define autism shapes how we think about communication. Autism is not a disease. It's not something that suddenly appears, and it's not one single experience. Autism is a neurodevelopmental difference, meaning that the brain develops and processes information differently from very early on. And that difference influences how a person experiences the world, how sensory information is perceived, how predictable the world feels, and how social and communication signals are processed. Now, we all interact with our surroundings and environment through our senses. The way we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. We collect information from our surroundings through all those senses. For autistic individuals, however, sensory information can be experienced more intensely, less intensely, or simply differently. For autistic individuals, the background doesn't always stay in the background. The noises, the movement, they're always trying to steal that cognitive attention. So if somebody's trying to focus something else, and if there is all that demand in the background, there's no need to wonder why speech becomes difficult at that moment. When the sensory environment is demanding, the communication doesn't disappear, but it may look different. Autism also exists on a spectrum, but that's not a straight line from mild to severe, no. A better way to think about it is like a profile, a mosaic. One autistic person could be highly sensitive to sound, but not to touch. Another person could be very verbal, but they may find conversations exhausting. And some may speak later, some may speak differently, or some may not speak at all. When we look at it this way, communication stops being about what's lacking and starts being about what's working. So when we talk about autism and speech, we're not just talking about one single story. We're talking about many ways of experiencing and responding to the world. And when we speak, which is something we often do without even thinking, our brain is doing three things all at once. Number one, it's telling our mouth to say something. And number two, it's controlling the muscles of our mouth, lips, and tongue. And number three, it's listening to what comes out. So it's basically a loop. So it's telling you, say this, and then you say it, and then it picks up on what's been said to make sure what came out is correctly said and there's no errors. So for example, if you're trying to say cat and you end up saying bat, your brain will immediately pick up on that error and correct it. And this usually happens This adjustment happens without even you noticing it. And this feedback loop is how we initially acquire speech as infants. So when you think about it, for example, babies don't start with words, they start with sounds. And these sounds are often messy, they start cooing, babbling, and they're inconsistent. And we find it really cute when babies repeat the same sounds over and over again. They say ba, 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 da, da, da. But that's not random. What happens is that's the brain collecting information. That's the brain collecting data. When they're repeating the same sound over and over again, they're trying to make sense of what's coming out of their mouth when they move their mouth in a certain way. And over time, what happens is the brain begins to predict that if I move my mouth like this, I get this sound. And over time, that speech becomes automatic. And when that feedback is clear, when it's predictable, the brain can fine-tune speech quickly. But when that same sensory feedback is less clear, if it's unpredictable, what happens is the brain still learns, but it learns a little differently. It uses different strategies. And this brings us to an important idea. Learning speed and learning ability are not the same thing. And this process depends heavily on reliable sensory feedback loop. And this loop does not even stop when we're older. So you're thinking, I'm an adult now, I know how to speak. Is the loop gone? No. Think about a time when you're in the library, the way you whisper. You whisper, right? Or when you're in a chaotic, noisy restaurant. Think about how it feels to try to speak or communicate when you're tired, overwhelmed, right? There is this loop constantly in action. The loop is constantly calibrating, constantly adjusting. And that calibration depends heavily on the feedback we receive from the environment through our sensory systems. For autistic individuals, however, this recalibration may take more conscious effort, not because the system is broken, but because the sensory information feeding into the loop is different. Some sounds may feel too intense. Others may be really hard to separate from the background noise. Some may feel unpredictable. So imagine a child learning to speak while the feedback they're getting is louder than they expected, or less stable, or really hard to filter from every other noise in the environment. It becomes really hard for that to happen, for learning to happen, but the brain is still trying. So what happens is the brain adapts. It adapts by seeking additional cues. So an autistic person may rely more on social cues by looking at lip movements, or they may learn through imitation or repetition. So from the outside, this may look like a delay, a deficit, a failure, but that's not true, because from the inside, this is strategy. I have worked with various autistic individuals over the years who heard every single sound in the room. The humming of the lights, the footsteps in the hallway, the scraping of the chairs, somebody chewing something, and it was too much. And when this overload is loaded on that individual, it's not hard to understand why speech may feel difficult at that moment. And this is where reframe matters. When a person perceives the world differently, they don't fail to learn. They learn in a way that makes sense to their brain. And that difference isn't something to erase. It's something to understand and support. And this is exactly the research we are conducting in our lab. But this perspective matters and extends far beyond just research. Think about a classroom, a noisy, busy classroom, and a child trying to learn and listen in that environment. And let's think and imagine that the same child has sensory sensitivities in a way where each sound feels more unpredictable, more intense. And that child is no longer feeling safe in that environment. And for that same child, small changes can make big impacts, such as offering a quiet space, offering more visual cues, more predictable routines. And this can be extended into other places, such as therapy, homes, and playgrounds. When environments matches the sensory needs, learning becomes more accessible. And sometimes Progress doesn't come from teaching harder. It simply comes from teaching the right way by turning the volume down, slowing the pace, or adding a picture or two. This approach also changes how we measure progress. Instead of asking, is this person meeting typical communication expectations? We ask, am I noticing how this person is communicating within their own abilities? It's recognizing that learning has not stopped or that speech feedback loop is broken. No, it simply means that the learning is ongoing, shaped by individual sensory experience. If information that is being inputted into that loop is different, the strategies that develop will be rightfully different too. Some people might speak less because speaking takes up more effort. Some people might rely on scripts or repetition. Some may not speak at all. And these aren't signs of delay or failure. They are adaptations. So if there's one idea I hope to leave you with today, it's this. Human brains are incredibly adaptable. There is no single correct way to learn, speak, or communicate, because speech is not a single pathway. It's a relationship between the brain, the body, and the rest of the world. And autism beautifully reminds us that variation is part of being human. It's not something to erase, but something to understand. When we listen closely, not just the speech, but how people experience the world, we move from trying to fix people to supporting them. And this is exactly what our research aims to do. We look at how different brains process information differently, and not to fix autistic brains, no, but to understand how sensory information is processed across different brains. And this is where I would like to leave you with an invitation. If you're a person who's autistic, or a parent, or a caregiver, please reach out to us. I would love to hear from you. Even if you just wanted to ask questions, participate in the research that we have in our lab, please contact us at speechcognizentlab@gmail.com, or visit our website at www.cognizantlab.ca, or simply scan the QR code on the screen. Even if you just wanted to say hi, I would love to hear from you. The more we listen to how people experience the world, the better we become at understanding how they communicate within it. Thank you so much for listening and for being open to seeing communication a little differently.